Hello, today we are discussing coding credit card charges electronically. We do this by downloading transactions from a banking website. We download the transactions into an Excel document before we import the transactions into QuickBooks. By downloading the transactions into an Excel document, this allows the card users or administration support to code their own transactions before the transactions are posted to QuickBooks. By coding, we're referring to providing the general ledger account number, the class, and the job if you are tracking restricted funds for each transaction. Coding is very important if you want to have proper managerial reports to be able to track your cost, your spending, and your results. Cost allocation is a requirement of nonprofit organizations that prevent us from being able to download transactions directly into QuickBooks because cost allocation will be much more difficult. Now, to begin the process, you would go to the banking website. I'm showing Chase here as an example. You would sign in by putting your username and password, and then you would download the transactions for your credit card into an Excel document. When you download transactions, there are 5 standard fields that are downloaded. You have the transaction date, which is your sales date, is your receipt date. Your posting date is the date it actually posts to your statement. Transaction detail includes the vendor name and other miscellaneous information. Of course, the amount. And usually there is a unique identifier, a reference number. This download did not include a reference number, so we left the field blank, but we do keep the field for future downloads. The sort column is our own personal column. We have allowed for 200 transactions in this template. So if I scroll down, you'll see that we have pre-numbered 200 rows. See right there, 200 rows. So this field here, or this column here, has been inserted by us to keep track of the transactions, as you'll see later in the document. Okay, you will notice at the bottom of the workbook, you'll see a bookend divider in yellow. This sheet is intentionally left blank. This divides the sheets the client will use and the sheets that the accountants will use to update the workbook. The tabs in red are used by the accountants. We will update the raw data, the vendors, accounts, classes, and jobs, and the client will update the coding sheet. Now, to allow for easy cost allocation and coding, we have created these other tabs in the Excel document. We have vendors, we have accounts. These are the general ledger accounts from your QuickBooks program. Classes, these will be classes from your QuickBooks program, and jobs, any restricted funds. We download directly from your QuickBooks program your personal general ledger accounts, classes, and jobs. For vendors, we have created alias names for the most reoccurring transactions. Most people use their credit card for fuel, lodging, food, airfare, supplies, and parking. There's various vendors that you use to buy those things, but it's the same things you buy over and over again. So whenever you use 7-Eleven, Racetrack, Shell for fuel, we call the vendor name CC Fuel. If you go buy supplies, you might go to OfficeMax, Staples, Walmart, Target, Amazon. But you're buying supplies, so we give it the name CC Supply. And CC just stands for credit card. So credit card supply would be the name of the vendor for any one of the vendors that you go to buy supplies. We use these standard names to simplify the coding process, also to eliminate duplicate names, different variations of the same name. This will allow for us to be able to quickly code transactions and use the exact same name each time. It also limits the number of names in your vendor list. Now, before we talk about the coding sheet, let's look at the instruction sheet. The instruction sheet is for the client, and the instruction sheet explains each field that you will find on the coding sheet. So you have each field here going down, which will explain a brief summary of what you should record in each field. The shaded areas are the only areas that the client will be inputting data. So I'll go to the coding sheet, and you'll see these shaded areas. This area here, we call this beige. This area is blue. On the instruction sheet, it will explain to you what the beige areas are for and what the blue areas are for. Now, the beige areas, I will just briefly explain, have drop-down boxes, which will allow you to choose from the list. If you look at accounts, you actually have all of your general ledger account numbers in here, so you can scroll down and choose the account you want. So all the beige areas have drop-down boxes with your classes or your jobs. So you can actually choose instead of typing in your selections. Also on the coding sheet, the blue areas are where you actually type in information. So for the memo section here, you will actually type in the purpose of each expenditure. And on the instruction sheet, you'll notice in the memo section right here, it explains to you, please use the field to fully describe the business purpose for the credit card charge. Okay? So let's go back to the coding sheet. You'll notice that there are already amounts on the coding sheet. These amounts are pulling from the raw data dump that we talked about earlier. So your coding sheet already has each transaction that has been downloaded from your bank statement. The sort number over here tells you which number it is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, going all the way down to how many transactions you actually had on your statement. We have given you 5 rows for each transaction. So for each row, you would put in the payee, and you can allocate up to 5 rows for each transaction. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to give you 3 examples of how to record the coding for each transaction. So this first row here, you'll see we went to Office Depot and we paid $66.17 for this transaction. So the payee, I would click on the drop down and I would use CC Supply. Here I type in an example. I'm typing in purchase paper and pens for presentation in office. So that gives me my business purpose. The amount is there. The account, I would click here, scroll down, and I'm looking for supplies. Office supplies. So I choose office supplies. Class, I might choose administration. There's no job, so I would leave that blank. And now this transaction is coded. I move on to the next one here. Now, transaction number 2 is Vonage Business. I don't have an alias for Vonage Business, so I would just type in the name. It's going to give me an error message saying, hey, we would like for you to use one of the lists, but if not, you can hit continue and it will leave the name that you typed in, okay? So whenever you have a transaction that does not apply to one of the 6 pre-alias names, you can type in the actual vendor name instead. You still put in a memo. I'm going to say sample memo. Okay. The amount. Now here, if this was a split, I could put $50 here. I could type over that. I then would find telephone. I could choose class. So I could have admin. And if I wanted to split this, when I scroll over, this tells me how much is left, 47.42. So I can click here and put 47.42. And when this is 0, that means everything has been allocated. This error check column will tell you when it's been completely allocated. So then I come back over here. I could type in a memo on the second line. I put Vonage Business again. Here, I actually scroll down and find supply telephone again. I choose a different class, make it research. And now this has been split, okay? I can scroll over, make sure this is 0, and now I know that my control total is 97.42 and it's been completely allocated because that's 0. If I were to put another amount right here, let's say $50, I now have a error check number here, means it's too high by 50. If I subtract 50, it means I'm too low by 50. I take it off, this means I'm in balance. The next thing to take note is that the top 5 rows of the Excel document has been frozen. So when you scroll down, you'll notice this is transaction 1. As I scroll down, transaction 1 goes away because the top rows are actually frozen. So make sure that as you scroll down, you understand that you are freezing the top 5 rows. Scroll back up. I'm going to go to transaction 4, okay? And let's say Lauren Publications, I type this in, click on the cell. I notice that I don't want to choose any one of these, so I click here and I type in Lauren Publications. I continue with yes. I can type in a memo. Okay. And let's say when I look at the chart of accounts, I can't pick an account that makes sense to me. Well, we have an account called Ask Accountant. Always choose Ask My Accountant if you do not have an account that makes sense for you, and then we can code it later. The accountants will code it later. And then if you're not sure about the class or the job, leave the fields blank, and then we will have to discuss with you later on how to code that. But it's better to leave it blank than to put in a false class or false job. Now remember that the shaded areas are the only areas that you actually use for input. The other areas on the worksheet are actually protected. You will not be able to change these dates or this code. You also will not be able to change the reference purpose only fields. This is your error check, and this is your control total for each transaction. So as you allocate the transactions, This will keep you understanding where you started. 6840, this will let you know if you're in balance. If you need an additional row for a transaction, you click on the blank row underneath that transaction and you hit Control plus. Control plus will insert a row for you. You Control plus again, it will insert a row for you. The blank cell you actually cannot enter into. That cell is actually protected, but you can insert rows above and then you can type into those rows. Okay, once you insert rows, you're not allowed to delete them. You can leave them blank, but you cannot delete rows. You can only insert rows. Okay, that concludes going over coding credit card charges. You would simply go down the list and you would code all the transactions that have been posted for this period of time, and then you would send this document to your accountants and they will import these transactions into QuickBooks. Okay, if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to call Daryl Harris, CPA.